Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ellen Ramsey. I'm director of the Eligibility Center and the liaison to the Competitive Experience Committee. Welcome to today's open forum on the competitive experience legislation. Today's session is meant to provide you all with an opportunity to get a recap of what's on the floor and then be able to make comments or ask any questions you may have prior to the upcoming caucuses and the business meeting early next week. Before we get started, I did want to take a moment to introduce the committee members and advisors that have been working on this legislation for the past several years. So our current committee members are Jose Larios from Montreat College, Lucas Morgan, LSU Shreveport, Kevin Sweeney of Wayland Baptist, Kurt Long, Clark University, Dick Teeter, Friends, Larry DeSempler, the Crossroads League, and Marcia Lashley is the chair from Missouri Valley College. We have also had the good fortune to have Dr. Barbara McMillan of Blue Mountain College provide a presidential perspective at points along the way over the past year or so. And we also have several former committee members who serve in an advisory capacity to ensure that we maintain some historical perspective as well. So many of these folks are on the call today, and we'll be able to hear from them once we reach the discussion portion of the session. But big kudos to them for the hard work that they've put in to date. All right, to get us started, I did want to just set the stage with a little bit of context on competitive experience in general. So as a reminder, determining eligibility really has three different components. We first have the academic standards, then we also have the athletic standards, and then amateurism. So of course, being a competitive experience proposal, we're focusing here on the athletic standards. And there's actually kind of two subcomponents to that: the intercollegiate participation, as well as non-intercollegiate participation. And ever since we started the NAIA's current approach to competitive experience, which relies on elite level participation for charging seasons, there have really been a variety of bylaw proposals and adjustments to policy like the evaluative criteria that have happened over time. And while the intent for those changes has always been to make sure that we're assessing seasons of competition appropriately and to really level the playing field, when you take all of those adjustments collectively, you end up with a rule that's very complex to understand and to apply. And this committee is really on the front lines of that as they hear appeals to seasons of competition charged by the Eligibility Center. And so that's really led them to where we are today, knowing that they've experienced all of this and they've just seen there's some improvements that can be made. And this proposal that's on the floor for the business meeting is really going to focus on the intercollegiate portion. If you'll recall to some of the different feedback opportunities that you've experienced over the past couple of years, there are additional components on the outside competitive experience portion, but those will likely come in future proposals in 2021. So the current proposal is mostly on your screen here, and you should have access to the full language online. But it mostly institutes the minimum participation requirement prior to a student's intercollegiate NAIA season of competition being charged. So early on, we did hear feedback that 20% could be confusing if that's not a whole number. So you'll see here in the table that there are some actual numbers that should look familiar to you, as that 20% is the same standard that's currently being used for medical hardships. So the bylaw says that the intercollegiate season won't be charged until the student competes in more than 20% of the allowable contests or dates during their 24-week season, although any postseason shall result in the season of competition. I will note that one portion of this proposal that is not listed on the screen is that it would also remove the unattached exception and replace it instead with an exception specific to Olympic trials or Olympic team participation. So that's the one other component that you should be aware of. that was a very quick recap for us here. We do know that throughout the feedback opportunities in the past couple of years, there have really been kind of two main questions or concerns that have been raised a variety of different times. And so I do want to turn it over to our committee members to discuss those here in just a moment. And while they do that, you all can prepare to participate in today's Q&A portion. And so you can participate in one of two ways. You can either click on the participants icon in your bottom kind of toolbar there and raise your hand. And that'll indicate to our staff that you would like to speak or ask a question. And Josh Bohr will be facilitating that. He'll go ahead and unmute you when we're ready. Or if you'd prefer, you can submit a question or comment via chat. You'll select chat at the bottom of your screen, and then please submit any questions or comments to NAIA host. So those are your couple of ways to participate. But with that, we'll kick it off with our committee members to talk about some potential concerns that coaches have raised just regarding a variety of loopholes. So I believe Lucas or Kurt, you were gonna take this one first.
We'll share different points of view here, Ellen, but I polled the coaches in my department, and I'll just pitch out a couple things that they asked. First one was, how does JV figure into this rule? Obviously, JV counts just as any other would, and they will need to be tracked just as a varsity participant would. They also asked, how is the 20% figured? And you just put up a display that shows that. A couple of simple questions. And then we also had a question, do scrimmages count? Scrimmages do not count in the overall. That is just based on the general limit for each sport.
Well, and as a new member to the Competitive Experience Committee, I want to give kudos to the previous members that have done quite a bit of work on this as well. I would also direct you to the frequently asked questions, because that's something that we've really taken a lot of time to look at and see the value in the amount of information that's being presented there. You know, one of the things that's important that I believe from an athletic director's perspective is making sure that the members on your campus, the SID, the athletic director, the eligibility people, all are working together with your coaching staff to make sure that you're tracking this information. It's not hard to do with the form that has been created. I think that's a great form. I think it can continue to stay within Excel, or it can be shared through Google Docs. On our campus, we use Google Docs to share documents, and I think this is something that really can be shared between those individuals on campus to really track not only your varsity participants, but your freshmen and your JV participants, which seems to be where a lot of the questions kind of seem to be focused around.
Great, thanks guys. Speaking of the tracking component, I know that's been probably the most frequently expressed concern. And Marcia Lashley, the chair of our committee, has created a template that they're using at Missouri Valley College even this year. So Marcia, would you go ahead and share your screen and just show everybody what you all are using?
Okay, can you see that okay now?
Yes.
All right. Well, this is, you know, if COVID has done anything, this gave us a good, we need to be tracking this now. We need to be tracking it this year. We need to track all participation in light of the 50% rule for this academic year. So it gave us a good jumping off point to put some things into place. And this is something we're trying out on our campus this semester. I built it in Excel, but transitioned it over to Google Docs. And this allows our head coach and sports information director to have access, and athletic director to have access to this anytime they want. So what I've done, I blacked out part of it just for the students' privacy. This is one of our teams here this semester. And I had a shared list of every student athlete that had been certified eligible. And you could pull that from your student information system. You can actually export things out of the ECP software if you like, and that would probably be the most accurate, as those are the students you can filter out just those who have been certified eligible, and just put them into an Excel or Google Sheet format and build in your formulas based on the allowable competitions. So this is one of our teams, and I pulled in their student ID number and their last name, and I blacked that out for today, left their first name, the previous season's competition. We just wanted, our coaches wanted that in there, and we pulled it from the software. They also want to know JV or varsity, because we track that on our campus, and we have some pretty good sized JV teams. And JV is tracking participation in varsity sports is generally pretty easy because you have DAC stats and all that information to support you, but tracking participation in JV has always been one of the areas that's been problematic for schools. That I've seen that come across through medical hardships, requests for exceptions, and things like that. So, or a student thinks he participated and he didn't, it was a scrimmage or it wasn't. It's always been something that's been hard to track. But this will give us we want to track it on our campus for varsity and junior varsity to avoid those issues. So after each game, our coach or head coach or the designee, whoever we decide on our campus, will go in there and just put the number 1 in for every student that participated in that game. And you can see as I do that, the percentages change. And you can see at any given point. So these students that are all above 20% now will be charged a season of competition under the new rule. As soon as this gets to 50% for this year, that's when they will be charged the season of competition. We're testing it this semester. Each sport, some it's set up by, depending on which sport, it's looked at differently. Some it's play dates, some it's matches, games, whatever. We're just going to try it this semester and hopefully come up with some improvements. What else do we want to track while we're in here? And move along. The point that we need to keep track of here, that once I pull the initial pull in, and then as we do addendums, we realize we have to remember to get those over in this list as well. A coach was trying to track some things this weekend, and I had done some addendums on Friday, and the student's not on here for me to put in a season of competition. So if there's any questions like that, this is how we're doing it on our campus. I'm sure there's 100 other ways for you to do it, but this was where most of the questions that we received surrounded how in the world are we going to track this. This is going to be a lot of work for somebody. And I agree, it is a lot of work for somebody. It's a lot of work for your athletic department, for your FAR, but it's worth the effort to help those students save a season of competition. Because too often we've seen over the years, the one pitch, one play, 1 second in a game and they're charged. And we just didn't think that was fair. So it's worth the effort for that alone.
Marcia, and are you all using this same spreadsheet for the financial aid purposes as well?
Yes, we are. And that's why we wanted to track it that way as well. And again, we have to track it for that anyway. So this is something we should all be doing right now, this semester, this year. So I just want to stress that. I can't stress that enough. And while this proposal is for the next academic year, we need to be testing it this year and using it for the financial aid compliance portion, as well as the 50% rule for this semester, for this year.
All right, well, Josh, as our NAIA host and kind of question moderator, as we're receiving anything through the chat, do we have any audience questions at this point?
Nothing's been sent to chat yet, so if you got your questions, go ahead and get those sent on in, or raise your hand. Okay, it looks like Stephen Gast has a question. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and let us know what institution you're with.
I'm at Presentation College in South Dakota. Question on the sheet you had before that, where you were outlining the requirements like football, 20%, they get they can play in 3 games before they count. Has that been approved? Or I thought that was kind of held up in some of the legislators stuff that's been going on the last year.
That's what this rule is. That's what we are proposing. I was just showing the sheet to say, just as an example on how you can track that moving forward to next year. And you could do it, you could do a reverse sheet where you just have, once a student reaches 3 for football or however many for soccer, you could set the sheet up to calculate it that way as well. This year we just did it by percentage because we're tracking this for 50% for this semester.
I think he may be talking about the sheet before that Ellen had up, the actual bylaw.
Right.
Ellen, can you put that up again? Yeah.
Yes, so this table here, is that what you're referencing, Stephen?
Yes. Yes. Is that
Yes, so this is the proposed number of contests, which is about that 20%. That 20% threshold is the same that's currently used for the medical hardship. So those contests or dates would be very similar to those limits that you're currently tracking on now for that purpose.
And does this get approved with this meeting, or does this get approved later?
That will be approved at the business meeting, which is next week. This session is just to ensure that folks have a chance to view the legislation one more time, ask any questions, or advocate for or against.
Okay.
So your voting delegate will take action on this next week.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
And just again, it's not to be confused with the financial aid compliance rule that has to do with the 3 dates for football or 12 contests for baseball. That has been approved and is in the rule book for the 2021 academic year.
Okay, so we do have a question via chat asking if we can clarify the 50% rule.
Sure. So the 50% rule that's been referenced is actually a short-term exception that was approved by the Council of Presidents due to COVID-19. So the Competitive Experience Committee, the National Eligibility Committee, and the COP all worked together to establish a threshold that they felt would provide institutions and students with a little bit more flexibility due to all of the unknown circumstances that we're all still currently experiencing with the effects of COVID. So it states that students can compete up to 50% of their maximum allowable contest limits. So very similar to the proposal here. I do not have those numbers off the top of my head, but we can post a link to those FAQs in the chat so you all can see that. So if students participate in more than 50%, at that point, they would be charged the intercollegiate season of competition for the 2020-21 academic year. Or if they participate in NAIA approved postseason, that will also result in a season of competition charged.
Okay. Another question coming in, not specific to the rule, but asking this is being recorded and where will this be once this is over so that it can be shared with the rest of their athletic staff?
Yes, absolutely. We're recording this session today and it will be available on naia.org/CEC. And it will also be available on the fall meetings homepage, which has the schedule for the events today through next week, as well as some background information. So it'll be available in both of those places.
Okay, I got a couple more coming in here via chat. The question that's being asked is basically for the 20% rule for these sports, for JV, they're using the example of basketball, would the same 20% number apply to the JV program that is listed in the bylaws, or would it be 20% of the JV contests? And I think I'm asking the appropriate question, Robin. If that doesn't summarize what you're asking, let me know.
Go ahead and take this one if you all would like. The 20% is of the maximum allowable as listed in that table, and it is of any type of participation. So whether the student competes in JV, varsity, or freshman programs, any combination of that goes over that 20% limit would result in the season of competition.
All right, another question. This is from Adam Johnson. He says, on the breakdown by sports page that we were showing, it currently shows 7 dates for softball being the threshold for being charged a season of competition. If this legislation is approved, moving softball to games instead of dates, does that number go to 12 games like baseball?
Yes, so the way that the legislation works is the proposals have to be based upon the bylaws as they are today in the handbook. So we can't assume that the softball legislation will pass. However, if they both do pass, then yes, this proposal would be adjusted to reflect the appropriate new limits based on that other approval as well. Good question.
Another question from Jesse Godding. How does this work with transfers from other governance organizations who may have played less than the required contests as outlined in this bylaw?
Yeah, so the proposal does not change the component of our current rule that states that we honor other associations' charges at face value. So this would only be able to govern intercollegiate competition at our member institutions. When students transfer into the NAIA and their initial eligibility is being assessed, we would still reach out to their former institution and have to charge seasons however their association would do so.
Okay, and then if this legislation is approved, will there be a need to submit medical hardships in the future?
A good question. So you'll notice that the 20% threshold would basically trigger the season of competition charge, which is the same number under which is now required for the medical hardships. So the hardships themselves would remain in the bylaws, but you're absolutely right that basically they become moot, at least for NAIA participation. However, they do still remain available as an option. For example, if one of your transfer students were coming from a different intercollegiate institution, and they were charged a season there, they would have the option to pursue a medical hardship under the NAIA rules. So it will remain in the bylaws. However, you're right, it would become unnecessary basically for NAIA participation.
And then a question of, will we be sharing the file that Marcia showed earlier? And if so, where will that be at for members to access and use?
Yes, so that is available online at nai.org/CEC. And I'll actually go ahead and share my screen and show you all where you can find that. Is that coming through?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is where the recording will be available. This red button will be replaced with a link to this video recording. And then if you scroll down, there are some additional resources for you. Some just best practices for implementing the tracking. And then this here is a link that will download the template that Marcia was using. So you can try to use that on your campus and adjust it however fits your structure.
Okay, so another question. How does this current season with COVID fall into the 20% threshold? And then what would the maximum contest number be used during this season?
So this proposal won't be in effect until the 21-22 academic year. The current rule would be in place for the duration of this academic year, along with that 50% exception that we noted earlier today. Both in the future and I believe under the current exception, the maximum allowable contests have not been adjusted in this proposal, nor have they been adjusted for the application of the COVID exception. And that's really to enable maximum flexibility for you all and for the students to be able to get some participation in this year without, potentially being using seasons of competition basically too quickly. So it would be the current maximum allowable contests that are listed in the handbook.
Okay, no new questions in chat right now, and nobody raising their hands. Oh, actually, did just have another one come through. I'm just going to read it verbatim. The response on medical hardship made it sound like a transfer had a medical issue at previous institutions that would meet our hardship requirements that we apply to the NAIA. This person's understanding is that the previous institution needs to grant the hardship. Is that still the case?
I do believe that's the way most people obtain hardships from previous associations. However, it's not required. I do see that one of our legislative services folks is on the line. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute Lindsay and put you on the spot here to make sure we're answering that correctly.
Yep, and then first up, can you hear me? Make
Yes.
sure you hear me. All right, good. Sorry about my name there. That was from a previous meeting and I'm unable to change it. So I am Lindsay Thompson with the Manager of Legislative Services. Yes, hypothetically, if a student got a medical season-ending injury at a previous athletic association and it was charged, there are two options now, and there will continue to be two options, frankly, moving forward for those students. You can request a medical hardship request through us, where we will apply our rules as they stand at that time when the student was injured. So if a student was injured this year, or not this year, but last year, let's say, we would apply our rules and you could submit that medical hardship. And then the other way is the way that Ellen said, where you can request it through a previous athletic association. And just like all of our seasons of competition, we'll take that at face value.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Yep. Oh, there you go. You got it fixed.
Gotcha.
Okay, nothing coming through right now. If you do have questions, feel free to put that in the chat and send it to NAIA host, or you are able to raise your hand and I will unmute you and you'll be able to ask your question. And the question is, when will the voting on this bylaw change take place?
Sure. So we have a variety of caucuses throughout this week that will occur in both kind of small groups as well as the full membership caucus this Friday. And then the full business meeting is next week on Tuesday, October 10th. I'm sorry, 6th. Don't know why I said 10th. Tuesday, October 6th at 1 p.m. So that's when your voting delegates will log into our first ever virtual business meeting and cast their votes on behalf of your institution.
And then talk a little bit about why the unattached provision is removed in this proposal, or how the intention behind the unattached is now covered with this proposal.
Yeah, so any of the committee members, would you all like to speak to this point?
I could probably speak historically on this. It's been a frustration with the Competitive Experience Committee for, I think it's safe to say, years. that certain sports are treated with exceptions as far as unattached. So you could be a track and field athlete or a wrestling athlete, get out there and compete. But if you're a basketball player and get in for 1 second of a game, you've lost your year. And so the intent of this legislative, part of the intent of this legislation is to somewhat even the playing field, so that wrestlers and track and field athletes and some others are not able to compete and gain experience when others in other sports are not. And so that's been the historical perspective on this.
And I'll just build on what Drew mentioned, but I think that for many years, I've heard from the committee members that the original intent of that unattached exception was often to enable student athletes to participate in the Olympics. And the committee felt that the two components, both the new Olympic specific exception, along with allowing the 20% of the intercollegiate contests prior to the student being charged, kind of hit the sweet spot that got the rule back to closer to its original intent.
And the changes we've made to unattached over the last few years are a little bit, they were needed, but they're a little bit messy. You know, and this kind of, you know, wraps it up in all in one package. You know, a few years ago, we passed that you had to be otherwise eligible to compete unattached. And now it's simply, you know, unless I'm wrong, Ellen, on that, this just kind of wraps it up and puts it in one package.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Drew.
All right, not seeing any other questions in chat. No hands raised, so.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for taking some time out of your day to join us here and ask questions and make comments. Again, this will be available online shortly after the conclusion, so please feel free to share with your colleagues who may not have been available for this live version here. And I do just want to take another moment to thank the committee members, both current and former. This has just been a years-long process. They've put in a lot of thoughtful hours getting us to this point. So kudos to them and to Dr. McMillan as well for providing that presidential perspective.
And I'll give kudos right back to Ellen. Ellen, you have been very long suffering in this process, so we really appreciate it.
I don't think suffering's the word, Drew, but thank you.
Long suffering.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. I hope you have a wonderful day.